Hi, Limari.
Hi, Liz.
So we met in the woods. we met at D-Web camp, and I'm curious what you remember about how we met and then how we've gotten to know each other.
That's an interesting question. I love that too, because it's something I haven't revisited really since we were there. I attended D-Web Camp representing the Decentralized Identity Foundation. I also was really interested in seeing what was out there within this decentralized web community beyond maybe the people I had met at the Internet Identity Workshop. It was a beautiful and in somewhat at sometimes overwhelming event. There was a lot of information. There was a lot of different things happening, a lot of new people. And one of the wonderful things that they did is they had these groups that they called Weaver groups. And I remember we just randomly got paired up into this group during the course of the entire event. I remember it was great because I did feel, you probably remember, I felt overwhelmed a lot during the event. I am an introvert. Events that are very social, they can be challenging. And I remember it was so wonderful at the end of the day to just have this fun group of people that you were a part of. And you always had like this interesting joke or just interesting way of looking at things that would make me laugh. And I remember that being like so fun to be around you. Also, I felt very comfortable with you and the rest of the group and being able to share just very honest things like, yeah, I'm an introvert and it can be challenging to socialize for multiple days, all day. And just having that place to come to at the end of the day and just to be able to share those things was really amazing. And it also added to that entire experience. Yeah, those are some of my memories of D-Web Camp. I'd be curious to hear what yours might have been.
That was D-Web camp in 2023, I want to say. That was my first D-Web camp, and I had no idea what to expect. I had been invited 11 days before, about a quarter of a way through a Zoom conversation with someone I had like just connected with who was like, oh, you should come to this thing. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, like none. And then it involved camping in the woods. I had never spent a night in a tent in my life. Like I had to go to REI. My wonderful partner in life, Eagle Scout, was looking at me like, I believe in you, honey. And yet, yeah, I got a tent and we went up to the Redwood, the forest moon of Endor. I swear there were like Ewoks and speeders around the place. Yeah, I mean, I was so wide-eyed from it because I really had no idea what to expect. And it was camping. All of us are camping. Like, this is not glamping. Like, this is like, we're camping. It was wonderful because one of the elements of it is the name badges. Like, you go to a conference. I mean, this is technically a conference, but you go to conferences and you get these giant name badges that then cause everybody to stare at your stomach. They have like your name and your title and the name of your company. Here, you had a homemade button that you made yourself when you walked in out of cut up pieces of old National Geographic magazine. And it would literally just have somebody's first name. And so all of like the artifice is taken away because you're surrounded by like super cool people, some of whom literally created the internet. I know your Wikipedia page, but is that like, oh my God, that's you. Like, I'm not used to places like where I'm just surrounded by people like with their legitimately like own Wikipedia pages that they did not create for themselves. One of the rules was you can join any conversation. You can rock up to any people who are talking and just kind of hang out, and they will open the circle to include you. And once you've gathered enough information from what you hear, you're welcome to just contribute and join. And it was such a freeing and exciting place to be that, I mean, as an extrovert, I was just in heaven. It's funny. I got into the weaving group because I am one of those people who are there like, we need a volunteer from the audience. And like, I'm up on stage before they're like, and we're going to saw you in half. And most people are like, I will volunteer after you tell me what it is I'm volunteering for. Whereas, I'm just like, oh, well, I could get sawed in half. I could get a cookie. This could go anyway. And so for me, it was funny. I ended up in the weaving group selection process just because they were like, everybody form a circle. And I was like, oh, yay, we're forming a circle now. We were all together. And they were like, and these are your weaving groups and you're meeting after dinner every night. And my first reaction to that was actually, oh, so now I have a limited group of people. Now I have this thing I have to be at. And there's like only 3 other people. I am one who seeks out giant groups. It's like, oh, look, there's a mass of people over there. What are they doing? And so it was interesting because for me, the part that I have learned to be more comfortable with in the last, it's really 5 years, is I have learned to embrace parts of myself that tend toward or can tend toward the introverted. I will never be an introvert. In terms of where I get my energy, I get my energy from being around other people, particularly large groups of loud people I don't know. What I've been learning is how to be in those reflective spaces, in those smaller spaces, in those one-to-one spaces, the richness that can come from that. And I have learned how to allow my batteries to recharge from that, because in some ways to me, that has, I will say historically, been more draining than being in the big groups of loud people I don't know. So my initial reaction was, oh boy, now I'm stuck. I can't just flit around like a hummingbird.
It's interesting to hear your perspective. That was so different from the same event, introvert versus extrovert.
Yes. And then we got into the group though, and I was like, oh, whoa, okay, wait, maybe like, actually I lucked into something awesome, because we had really meaningful conversations. And that's something else I prize. I value meaningful conversations that truly people can make meaningful connections with one another. We really hear each other. And that's what I got from our little group. I ended up really loving our little check-ins at the end of the day. I think we only ever had 3 of them because of when they started it and when camp ended. It's 5 days, but I think it's 4 nights.
Yeah.
And so it was really meaningful to me to have that time and to get to know you. Then you came to the open space session that I did on Saturday, and that was awesome. Then because we had that moment, we had that time, then we've maintained a connection since then. And so what started for me as very much part of my journey from full-on introvert, fire hose all the time, to learning to love these other spaces and appreciate that I can have parts of that within myself, and it's not what I lead with, and it doesn't have to be. Multiple things can be true at the same time. I can find the space like we had in our weaving group nourishing, and if given a choice, I likely will go to the large, loud group of people I don't know. And I can be in both spaces and I can appreciate what I find in both spaces. And so I loved that. And then I've loved that you and I have run into each other in other random spaces.
I can also relate to that just as an introvert too. The being able to appreciate people who are extroverts and being able to appreciate that, getting that energy from other people, because I have found that I need that too. I don't want to be around introverts all the time. I do like introverts, but then sometimes I want that extrovert to give me a completely different view of the world or a different energy. And it's great. And I just like being able to find that balance between the time I need to recharge and then the time I can go out. And also knowing how long I can do that for before it's time to reel it back in and become an introvert again. That's a whole process too.
I feel like process and journey are going to be a theme here. I'm curious, every time I talk to you, I learn something new about what you have done or what you're doing now. What's important for you that other people know about you that they wouldn't pick up on if they saw your resume or they just came across your LinkedIn profile?
That's a really good question. I think for me, learning has been so important. And if there's something I'm really excited about, I will devour everything written about it, look at videos and things like that. So it's always been, I've never been, the person to clock in, clock out, do something simple. I've always wanted to be somewhere where I can learn new things. So I think there's an intersection of that. And also I think there's an internal artist too. And this is interesting because I recently cracked open the artist's way. But being able to recognize those parts of us that are artistic, that maybe people in the past may have said, don't do that. That isn't paying money. It's a waste of time. and then coming back to those parts of myself. So I recently have started drawing again and going to drawing meetups. I've started painting casually at my house. I also have done a lot of music through the years. It's interesting, earlier you mentioned someone, before we started the discussion, you mentioned someone was doing choral music in his 80s, and I've done a lot of choral singing. I've trained classically, and I've done also some solo work. And now I'm working on vocals, more contemporary vocals, and also learning guitar and ukulele. So those things are all like really important for me to balance me out. Getting into the weeds of just the type of things that I have to do in the field of community management are awesome, because even though I'm an introvert, I love just the idea of bringing people together. Like, that's really kind of the spark plug for me, is I see people came together and I see that they grew, that they learned something new. And that's all wonderful. And then sometimes it's time for me to grow, for me to have an opportunity to unplug from the day and say, hey, let me nourish, those parts of me that maybe don't get to be used, throughout the day.
Yeah, what's something cool you've learned lately?
I would say, like, lately I've been working a lot on yoga, on learning what yoga is beyond just postures that are done in like a yoga class. And I guess I'll add, I'm completing a 500-hour yoga training at the end of May. And I did not expect to do that at all. It was kind of like, let me kind of just dive into a 200-hour and get the basics. And, I wanted to learn more about the mind body system. I didn't learn more about it. I actually felt that I just learned how to give a class. So now in this current training that I'm doing, it's more about like, what are the imbalances within us? And so one of the things that I've learned is, an aspect of our training is Ayurveda, which is the sister science of yoga that deals with healing. It's more medical. So it's treated as a doctor in India. Here, they're called practitioners. One of the things that we talk about a lot in Ayurveda practice is that each of us has imbalances based on the elements. It could be an imbalance of fire, it can be an imbalance of air, or it can be an imbalance of earth and water. And honestly, I did not understand this concept or why it was such a big deal. And I said, cool, some people are driven and they have a lot of fire. And some people are more kind of complacent, or things are okay. And so there's a lot of earth, right? Maybe too much. And then there's people who are all over and there's a lot of air. And I did not get it until I started working with clients one-on-one. And then I said, immediately, I could see what was happening based on this model, this ancient model from Ayurveda, how to actually be able to instruct and guide someone based on these types of imbalances. And so now I've started to take it with me throughout my life. I recently went to a conference where I felt very ungrounded and I felt all over the place, and I realized there's too much air happening. I'm literally in the air, in an airplane. I'm off the ground. Of course I feel all over the place. Of course I feel ungrounded. I've been doing nothing but preparing to leave. I've been going in my car to park. I'm going through TSA. I'm doing all of these steps, right? So there's too much air. So then I said, well, what can I do to bring myself back onto the ground? Put my feet onto the ground on the plane. Meditate. Think about coming back to something that's more solid. Maybe there's some food that I can eat that's going to bring me back into balance based on Ayurveda. Maybe there's a practice, a type of posture that will bring me back to the ground versus lift me up and give me more air in my life. So that was something that really just clicked for me in the recent period after having learned about it. I think 3 years ago, it was first introduced to me. And it's a wonderful model to be able to kind of look at ourselves and also see what's happening in other people and how we might help ourselves too and help ourselves heal. I know that that's kind of a big idea, but that's something I learned recently that's been really awesome and helpful.
As you were describing it, one of the things that I said I wanted to come back to and came out for me in that was your comments earlier about community connection, bringing things together, because creating communities are about really surfacing and building and enriching systems. Things are interconnected and interdependent. We're interconnected and interdependent. And as I was listening to you describe what you're learning about nourishment, it feels like a way that you are contributing even more to developing and building community and connection. How do you build up yourself? Well, you nourish yourself better. How do you build up others? Well, you find ways to help people connect and nourish one another. And so it feels very connected to me in terms of how you're moving through life in this season is one of reflection, new knowledge, and then finding all of these other connections, like all of these dots, and then connecting them further. And I know you've got a passion for community and people. I just love how these all relate to each other because you're building systems on system. I love systems. So it's really neat. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. And also, that's an interesting perspective because I didn't think of this model as related to community necessarily, but now that you're bringing it up, it absolutely is because if you're thinking about what's needed within a particular community, you look at what type of people they are, right? What is the tendency and who's leading it, who's doing what, and you can use this as a model to actually start to see what are imbalances even in communities as well.
How do you think about balance? Because that's something that's always challenged me. And I think it's probably because I had so much work-life balance talk forced on me. And I could never picture it as a 50-50 scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, as it relates to community, I mean, it's challenging. If there's a community that has a lot of fire, if there are people who are achievers in that community, you have to give them something to achieve. Because if you don't, they're going to walk away and not really be interested in it. You know, if your community is more people who are maybe they're a little more inert, maybe they like just being very sedentary, well, they might need a little something that's a little bit more fiery to kind of get them moving a little bit, like maybe something that's a little bit out of their zone, right? To get them moving. So it creates a little spiciness for them, right?
I'm laughing at that. So you just brought me back to a memory. It was almost 25 years ago, 23 maybe. It was the rehearsal dinner the night before my partner and I got married. One of his best friends from college was there and in our wedding party, and he got up to give a toast at our rehearsal dinner. And he described my partner in life as the just not predictable as in like a boring sense, but in the sense of someone who was intense, just deeply reliable, like someone that you knew was solid and stayed the course, and somebody who just moved very deliberately through life with a lot of intention. And he said that the thing he always wished for his friend, that he wished for my partner, was that he had a spark of chaos in his life. And then this friend looked at me and said, "I'm really glad the chaos arrived." And it is, sometimes you need the spark and the fire. And I'm glad that I've been able to do that now, into our third decade. But that just brought that back for me. Thank you. I love that memory. Thank you for bringing that back for me.
And I know, and that's a wonderful example too of bringing two people with maybe going in completely different directions, a lot of fire, a lot of earth coming together and actually balancing each other in a relationship. That's actually really beautiful.
Thank you for that. Journey, development, growth, that I said, I thought that was going to be a theme. definitely has been a theme in this conversation. It's been a theme in so many of our conversations. What are you excited about that you're working on or working toward right now?
Well, a couple things. So just to start with the yoga thing, I'm excited about working with more people one-on-one. That's just more of my jam than huge groups of people. And that's just because people, when you go in, this is so interesting. Okay, I'll say this. My teacher, my current teacher, when I first met her, she said, when you actually give someone a practice, type of practice you give them, it has a certain color. You know, for instance, you might have something that has a lot of back bends, something that has a lot of forward folds. You're trying to create an effect for someone based on what you're seeing their imbalances are. But if you go into a modern yoga class in the United States, what they do is they take all of those colors of those different types of practices and they bring it together so it makes brown. You will kind of generally come out feeling good, but it may not have addressed what you needed specifically. I really love the idea of being able to see imbalances, being able to give people something that's going to be supportive to whatever is happening in their life. So I do look forward to that. So yeah, I do want to like slowly, build a practice where I'm working with people, but also I'm still doing community. So this is really going to be my main thing for the foreseeable future. And I just moved on from the Decentralized Identity Foundation. So I'm really excited about new opportunities. I think some of the things that I'm really interested in are building relationships, communication, and just something I've been talking to with one of my community members. I have a community here in Los Angeles where we talk. We literally get together. We're all community professionals and we talk about community. And one of the things that's come up is how do you speak to people when you go into a new environment? Because if you speak to someone who is a CEO, who is a business leader, you have to speak to them in their language. But you as a community person are dealing with maybe knowing motivations and understanding motivations really well of people. But then someone else is really good at understanding how do you make money from something, right? And that's a strength too that you value. So how do you translate then community into what a business leader would understand, right? Or a marketing person into what someone in marketing would understand about the needs of the community. Or maybe there's people who are the money people, the finance people. There's all these different layers of individuals that understand and speak in different languages. And I'm really excited in diving into all of that. Like, how do you convey and understand? How do you convey what the value of community is going to be for that organization? How do you convey what it will take to grow that community? Also, this is something that comes up in organizations too that don't even know they need community.
And your excitement comes through, like the way your energy changes, the way just your voice, how much enthusiasm you have for it. And that is one of the first things that I learned about you was how you were in the role you were in before, developing community and understanding what community meant in that context. And I can't think of a time when we have needed community and community building more and people who can foster those spaces where community can happen. Because you can't just speak community into being. You can't add it to the end of something and say, oh, well, it is this fill in the blank community. And now people feel an affiliation and an identity. It doesn't work that way. People decide if they're in a community. People make community. And they need spaces that create the opportunity that foster that. And they need people who are curating those spaces and inviting others into those spaces and ensuring that people can feel a sense of belonging and inclusion in those spaces. Because coming back to this from a business perspective, if I'm a business owner and I have potential customers, I want those potential customers to feel a sense of belonging and inclusion when they think of and interact with my brand. because that's how I'm going to have a fantastic brand and a fantastic business. And so community and including people and helping them to feel belonging in that community, in those communities, that's at the heart of us having strong and sustainable businesses. So yeah, things that you'd think, oh, community, how does that relate to business? Business is dollars and cents. It's, you're either in the red or you're in the black. What does community have to do with this? The answer is everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was working for an open source community previously, and one of the things that was so striking is how committed people were to coming and doing the work. And some of them would come in and, their work might be supporting them coming in throughout the day. But there are other people that they're doing it after work or between things that, they're really putting a little bit of sacrifice on the line to commit the time because they so strongly believe in technology. And I think, it was a very inspiring community from that standpoint because people were really motivated from the standpoint of tech for good. And I honestly, being in that community sort of uplifted me and sort of uplifted my view of technology. All I was seeing was the negative, and then here I was seeing the positive. And that was such a wonderful experience. It was also wonderful to see people grow as well, because what we saw is if you give people an opportunity to do something, to make themselves useful, to build something, they want to take it in open source and technical communities. They want to build things. And so being able to see the journey through the hackathons that we did, I can mention one member who went through our first two hackathons, and he is basically on the verge of launching his own app. And he also got a really, really wonderful opportunity at a startup that he says actually gave him the opportunity to work on some projects that were like a dream come true for him. So it was so amazing to be part of that process of giving him a container where he can go to and work on a new challenge and refine his craft and then take that later into his career. So I really loved my experience in open source community, and I love seeing that process of seeing people grow, but definitely also thinking from the standpoint of mental health. If you're a technical person and maybe you're not getting that stimulation, well, open source and being able to contribute and learn new things and do hackathons, hey, that's great for you. That's great for collaboration, meeting new people, advancing in your career. And I was just able to see how this was such a supportive place for people to come to who had that drive, who wanted to do tech for good, who wanted to open up new opportunities. So it was really awesome all around.
And that actually feeds really nicely into, I guess, our kind of closing question. Who do you most want to talk to right now?
Anyone who identifies as a master of communication in the workplace, just learning a mastery of bringing people together, of building teams is something I'm really excited about, but I also want to grow. Like I've done some of it, but I want to grow in that capacity. I'd love to learn from others, people who are interested in sharing their knowledge of that. I would love to talk to those people.
I love our conversations. I love the directions that they go and that they all kind of come back to the same place of connection and shared meaning making and finding things in common and learning new things. I've learned so much new stuff about you, and I feel like I learn more every time I talk to you. Thank you so much for coming along and having this conversation.
Thank you, Liz. This has been a wonderful conversation. I'm really glad you had me on today.
Thank you.